Hi guys. So today we're going to discuss the crucifixion and irony. And this seems like a funny juxtaposition of ideas, but it leads to an important point. So what is irony? Irony is, in a sense, the demonstration of one's total mastery of a concept, such that one can get outside it enough to see it in an ironic context, and therefore surpass, or rather surpass, not bypass, but surpass debate about an issue because one is, through an ironic sense, demonstrating that they fully understand it, that there's nothing wishy-washy about the concept, that is totally understood because it can be made into irony or ultimately satirized. I mean, if when pushed to the limit. I mean, satire is kind of irony as showmanship, really. And irony then has a beautiful function in human consciousness and culture, and it's a way for us to validate our own sense of understanding of things and to make sense of things in a clearer way through the use of irony over the concepts which we understand. Or rather, we can know we understand them because we can see how to use them in ironic ways. We live in an ironic culture. The culture that we live in has become ironic to a point where the non-ironic is now the rarity. The sincere is rare. And when it tries just to be sincere, most of the time it's saccharine, it's cheap, it's manipulative. Real sincerity, really declared, honestly, meaningfully, is difficult to do in our ironic world. I mean, why is it the case that shows like The Daily Show and The Colbert Report have been the go-to source for news for a whole kind of generation, really, other than the slight sense of ironic self-satisfaction that the satire necessarily contains, made it feel more trustworthy in a way, because it could demonstrate satire and irony demonstrates an intelligence. I mean, you have to be intelligent to make something ironic or to see the irony in something. You have to be intelligent to do the kind of satire, radically intelligent to do the kind of satire that Stephen Colbert does. And then on the other end, you get another news source, and I'm not judging these sources here. I'm just talking about how they sort of function in human consciousness and society, like Fox News, which I think on its own level is a kind of satire of itself, a kind of ironic presentation of itself at this point. It feeds into the irony loop of culture that allows shows like The Daily Show and Colbert Report and The Onion and to exist, because it fills in the needed thing which it has to satirize, in a sense, and they know that it's built into that world, Fox News or the 24-hour news cycle or anything like that. It's built into it that it play into the game of irony altogether. And then this penetrates and saturates all of society. This saturates advertising, children's programming, movies. I mean, irony is the name of the game in the modern world. But ultimately, what is it doing to us as an overarching phenomenon of something, of a way that we're relating to society? I mean, look at the iconic sociological youth figure of the last 15 years is the hipster. Now, basically, at this point, the hipster has become nothing but a kind of a term for bohemian, just general bohemian culture, which has always existed and always had similar aesthetic tropes. But at its purity, especially when it began, the hipster was quite indeed irony as person. I mean, irony as presentation of self, fully ironic to the core, in theory. I mean, in that sense, hipsters were devoid of kind of meaning because they were just purely irony. I'm not against irony, but irony has a danger. It's a danger of because one can feel self-satisfied because of one's ability to process irony and generate ironic perceptual understandings of the world. Irony requires distance. It requires getting outside and then looking back upon the thing with a kind of judgment, a kind of, with a judgment that nonetheless passes itself off as knowingness. I mean, a knowingness is at the heart of irony. To know something and then to be able to use that knowingness in a way that's not a direct confrontation with it anymore. It's not an argument about the thing. It's a knowingness that allows you to then invade other topics in a way. And that is a danger of irony, because at the heart of God, because he is so outside everything, as both an ontological figure and a concept, that he cannot be ironized, if that's a word, I don't know. But he cannot have, it's hard to satirize, really satirize God. It's not hard to satirize religions, but it's very difficult to satirize God. In particular, the crucifixion of Jesus Christ as a, not just event, but symbolic form, which has towered and hovered over the mental ecosystem of humanity for the last 2,000 years, has it resists satire. There's been a few attempts, and mainly they're against religion, like Life of Brian and some of the silliness of organized religion. But directly satirizing or making ironic the crucifixion, it resists it, just like it resists commodification, which is something else I'll talk about. But it's because God is so over that he's deep, that you can't get outside it enough. But this has ultimately, I mean, I'm talking about it in very sort of conceptual, almost in linguistic terms in a way, but this has serious implications about being and about how to relate to God and the experience of God, knowing that he's not, that your mind is, which wants to control concepts enough that you can get totally on top of them and then make them ironic for you, which is what the modern mind does. That's not going to happen totally with God. That's not going to happen. It shouldn't happen, because God wants to destroy that part of your mind that constantly wants to think itself so clever. And the ironic impulse is that par excellence. The Via Dolorosa is an unironic event. It's an unironic experience, most of all. There's no smirking self-knowingness to it. It's what it's about. It's very telling that modern culture is so ironic. It's very telling that it's a sign that points to a kind of limit of human consciousness, that everything starts to become ironic. Everything starts to become self-knowing. Everything starts to become a contextual joke of itself. All throughout culture. And it's always a bad thing. I love irony. And there's irony in the Christ story. If you look, there's tons of irony, because it's a good story, and all good stories have irony, but the experience of Jesus Christ, and the experience of God, and the experience of what you're supposed to go through is ultimately not ironic. It's real. And it demands that you let go of the control that being able to satirize a concept gives you over that concept. There's deep anxiety and pain in culture that irony papers over, or that irony is a defense against, but it's not a solution for. You know, it's not a solution for, it's a defense against certain pains, certain anxieties. And only by a return to the realization that humility of an existential character and of a conceptual character, to an extent, is what's needed here to, in a sense, combat not any particular instance of irony, but the ironic impulse as an overarching way to approach lives and concepts, which it has become. Everywhere. You see it everywhere. And it's the information overload of modern society is all but demanding it. But the truth is soft and unironic and realer than you want to admit, and gets deeper under the skin than irony will allow, because irony always wants to get out. And God wants to get in. Isn't it ironic? Don't you think? God bless, guys.